Welcome to the Infowars Nightly News. It's Monday, July 14th, 2014, and here are our top stories.
Tonight, a former al-Qaeda head says ISIS works for the CIA. Then, report, immigrating children are found dead in the Rio Grande. And DARPA wants to know what's on and in your mind. That's next on the Infowars Nightly News.
I would talk about DARPA and brain chips 15 years ago, and they would have major publications say I was a barking at the moon lunatic.
We're told as the border is collapsing that we need to do it for the children. Now, of course, we're supposed to feel sympathy for them, and it is a real humanitarian crisis, but it is a manufactured crisis. And, of course, the media and the president doesn't want us to look too closely. Take a look at this story that was up on Drudge Report today. Small, lifeless, dead children found washed up along the riverbank of the Rio Grande. Now, the interesting thing about this story, because we all know that this is happening, this is one of the first times that it's been reported, but the interesting thing is how this was buried. And this was picked up by the Gateway Pundit from a Fox News report. And as I say, this was something that was at the very end of the article, kind of as an aside. They first started talking about the children coming across. And if you look at the picture on the article, you'll see some women carrying small children across with them because, of course, it's not true that these unaccompanied minors, these unaccompanied children, as they're now calling them, are truly unaccompanied. The question is, who's bringing them here and under what circumstances? Now, as I reported originally in the Fox News story, they said at first they were mostly teenagers, ages 14 through 17, arriving with their mother or brothers or no one at all. And then came the pregnant women, a mother nursing her infant, a small girl with wide eyes clutching a doll. And then out at the very bottom, they say, many don't make it across the river. Multiple sources became emotional when recounting their discoveries of small, lifeless bodies washed up alongside the riverbank. Now, is that compassion? Are we even being told the right story? If we look at other mainstream media reports, we see that same narrative, that it's these children who are making this journey. The New York Times put it this way. They said, fleeing gangs, children head to the U.S. border. And that's important where they put that comma. It's not that gangs are fleeing to the U.S. border, but they say the children are fleeing to the U.S. border. They say that the U.S. immigration policy offers preferential treatment to minors, and, of course, that is part of it. Then look at this story from the Wall Street Journal. Few children are deported. And they say in there, here's their narrative. Thousands of children from Central America are undertaking a perilous journey to the U.S., despite warnings from the U.S. that they'll be sent back. In fact, many will get to stay. Now, apart from the fact that the children are staying, look at the way they put this. They say thousands of children aren't listening to warnings. Instead, they decide to make the journey to the United States. That's a journey of about 1,500 miles over a couple of different countries. It would take 35 hours to drive it by car. But, of course, these children are not driving cars. How are they navigating their way across a continent? Here's how Glenn Beck put it.
Problem that is staring us in the face. The literal thousands of children that are attempting to navigate the treacherous terrain from Central America to the United States.
Now, that, of course, was from his broadcast less than a week ago. And the article that he put up on the Blaze, the title was, "We Must Open Our Hearts." And the quote is, "Through no fault of their own, they're caught in the political crossfire," Beck said, "of the children." You see, they were first undocumented minors, and now they're unaccompanied children. These are children who, in Beck's words, are navigating the treacherous terrain from Central America to the U.S. Now, if they're really children, they're not able to do that. They can't get that 1,500 miles, that 35-plus hours if they were to drive it by car. If you go back and look at that picture that we had before of the mothers carrying kids across, that is probably the best-case scenario of a lot of bad possibilities. In that situation, the kids are not unaccompanied, rather. They're accompanied by family members. They're accompanied by a mother or father or the entire family, using those children as an anchor to get onto the welfare state here. Now, of course, welfare isn't going to lift them out of poverty any more than it would in their country. And it's going to do the same thing to our country that it did to Venezuela. Of course, socialism didn't work there. Hugo Chavez gave a 700% return to the bankers. They famously said his interests perfectly aligned with ours. And a year after he died, they were still talking about, we had a quote from a Barclays executive, we've shown this many times on this show, saying that essentially they're going to take care of their sovereign debt first. In other words, they're going to take care of the bankers first. And that article came up because the people in Venezuela were fleeing because they couldn't get food, water, medicine. That's what's driving them here is socialism. And once they get here, what are they going to get? More of the same. Foreign aid does not work, whether it's done in that country or in this country. When they give them foreign aid in another country, it typically doesn't get through the corrupt bureaucracy and the politicians. And that's by design, of course. The same thing is going to happen in our country. That's why the war on poverty hasn't worked. But let's take a look at this issue of whether or not they're children. By NPR's own statistics, they're saying that the number of children who have come across has doubled in the last year. It's 10 times what it was 5 years ago. But if you look at the absolute numbers from their estimates, and of course, they're only estimates because we don't know how many people are getting across that aren't even being intercepted. And of course, if they are being intercepted, we have no way of knowing that we're being told the truth by the government because they keep everything so secret. But let's just go with their numbers. The numbers that they're giving us for the number of children who have come across, even though it's double last year, 10 times 5 years ago, that's still about the number that they estimate are coming across each month. So that's about 1/12, or about 8%, 8 to 10%. And yet the image that's being projected by everyone, and this is what Glenn Beck is jumping in on, the image is that this is a massive exodus of children who are coming across of their own volition and transiting the transcontinental dangers that are coming across there. That would be bad enough if that were the case. It would be bad enough if they were parents who are recklessly endangering their children, and we had Obama encouraging that with his policy, and people like Glenn Beck, the Wall Street Journal, and New York Times encouraging it to remain the same way by putting forth this phony narrative. But there's another, even worse case scenario, and that is a lot of these people coming across are gang members. As we've reported at Infowars.com, many of them have been identified as MS-13 gang members. These are transnational gangs. In other words, they're not limited to just one country. Think of them as the gangster equivalent of multinational corporations. And of course, they're moving here. Now, look at this story that's coming from HispanicallySpeakingNews.com. It's a Latino daily news program. They're pointing out what's going on with baby Zetas. We've got MS-13 gang members who are underage, and of course, we've also got the baby Zetas. These are two children who led a cell of the criminal group Los Zetas, caught holding 8 videos showing how the Zetas butchered victims of abductions even after they had paid the ransom. Now, they're going out and kidnapping people, taking video of them, and then taking video as they mutilate and execute these people. And the kids that are leading this, one of them is 16 years old, and his girlfriend, who is 13 years old. These are the kinds of unaccompanied minors who are also coming into the country. Remember I talked about that New York Times headline, fleeing gangs and children coming to the U.S.? It is fleeing gang members who are coming in. But maybe the worst case scenario are these gang members who may be abducting children as they do adults. Just like they did the baby Zetas here, they're also abducting children, holding them for ransom. We've also reported on that story where they had some of the children that they had kidnapped, they forced them to cut off fingers of the other children, telling them they would execute them if they didn't cut off the fingers. How do we know that these children that are coming across are being accompanied by their parents? Or are they being trafficked by these drug members? Are they being brought in as part of a human trafficking organization? We've seen that these organizations, these multinational drug gangs, have started out as part of the war on drugs. Of course, that was our gift to Central and Latin America, was the war on drugs. Now they have diversified into other businesses, sex trafficking, also human organ trafficking. That's why Jim Bridenstine was trying to find out what was going on at the detention center. But of course, a U.S. congressman like him could not see the children. I'm sure that Glenn Beck won't have a problem like that once he gets there. We've been threatened with arrest when we go and report on this, but of course, Univision is given access. If you will feed out the phony narrative that Obama is trying to put out about this crisis that he manufactured, then you get access. Otherwise, you don't. Take a look at what this Democrat, though, wants to do to correct the situation. We have a Texas congressman who wants to process the illegals in Central America. See, if it's too dangerous for them to make that journey, we can just go there and pick them up. Their free ride on the American taxpayer can start with a free ride on an airplane ticket. Now, if you think that's crazy, listen to Glenn Beck.
The best way to secure our borders and make America a safe place is to make it accessible to all those fleeing poverty and oppression.
So while the Democrat congressman says, why not have the State Department and DHS down in those countries processing potential refugees and applicants for asylum on the ground so they don't have to go through Mexico? You've got Glenn Beck saying that the way that we make the U.S. secure is by making it accessible to all who are fleeing poverty or violence. Really? Can we really do that? Is that really possible? Can we take on everyone in the world and put them on the shoulders of the American taxpayer? Do you see a problem with that? It's just like trying to adopt all the kids that you see. Of course, Nancy Pelosi said she would love to bring every one of them home. She didn't take a single one of them home. And of course, she couldn't take them all home because she couldn't afford to, even with all the money she's made in Congress on insider trading. But we can't afford to do that as a people either. Now, notice that Glenn Beck is saying that this is an emergency. This is a humanitarian crisis. But he wasn't going to go down to the border for 2 weeks. And when he was going to go to the border, he was going to give 2 meals, some teddy bears, and some soccer balls. And then the rest of it is going to be left as an exercise for you, the American taxpayer, to take care of the people who were brought in. Now, of course, Glenn Beck, when he says we must open our hearts, the implication is that if you don't open your heart, then you're cold-hearted and unchristian. But what did Jesus say about helping the poor? Listen to what he had to say. He said, whenever you give to the poor, don't sound a trumpet before you, as the hypocrites do, and on the streets. He says, to be applauded by people, I assure you they've got their reward. Well, what is Glenn Beck's reward? Well, by sounding the trumpet 2 weeks before he's going to go down and give a couple of meals and some toys to people that he thinks he's going to find at the border. And, of course, his reward is to get accolades from people like Joe Scarborough, who says he's a real Christian, he's Christ-like. Implication being is that if you don't think that we can take everyone in, then you're very unchristian. But what Jesus said was, when you give to people, don't let your left hand know what your right hand is doing. If he really wanted to help people, he could do it privately. He could adopt. He could do a number of things, but he's blowing his horn here 2 weeks before he goes, saying that it's an emergency, that we all need to go in and participate with that. See, there's a difference between charity and a welfare state. There's a difference between making someone better and making yourself look good. And I think that's what's going on here. I speak out about this because of what happened at the Bundy Ranch. I have seen Glenn Beck come to the aid of Harry Reid and Obama now 2 times in just a couple of months, and I find it disgusting. The lies that he told about the people that were there at the Bundy Ranch and the way he put out the talking points of Harry Reid, tried to paint Mr. Bundy as a sovereign citizen, which is the same as labeling him a domestic terrorist in the eyes of law enforcement, preceding the same types of tactics done by Harry Reid. He is putting out their talking points and doing it for them.
It's easy to say conspiracy theory. The United States government, Barack Obama is going down there and he's driving them from El Salvador to our southern border, and then he's flying to Washington during the day. It's easy to play the conspiracy game.
See, he throws those kind of phony straw man arguments out there. Now, he does, in that same video where he talks about how he's going to go give out teddy bears, he does talk about the U.S.'s involvement in a Honduras coup, but he also ignores the war on drugs, which is the source of the violence in those countries. He ignores the fact that American bankers, multinational bankers, have crushed those countries with debt in order to create a welfare state, which they're going to do both of those things here in spades. And then he also ignores NAFTA. Now, look at this story today from WND. Dr. Jerome Corsi writes about Mexicans blaming Americans for the famous death train. As Dr. Corsi points out, the 2005 KCS acquisition of the Mexican Railroad occurred under the broad canopy of the Security and Prosperity Partnership of North America, first announced by President George W. Bush in a meeting with the President of Mexico and the Prime Minister of Canada in Waco, Texas, March 23, 2005. So in a way, we don't really need to send the American government down there because we now have a NAFTA train company that is actually bringing the kids in, but it's not working out too well for them, and it's not going to work out too well for them and for us once they get here, once the multinational gangs start having gang fights in the universities where these young children are going to be able to get free rides, they're going to be able to get in-state tuition at the very least in the universities. It'll be a great place for them to accelerate the turf war between drug companies. And how's that working out in Chicago? Inner-city black residents are saying Obama is the worst president ever. Why are they saying that? Well, they say that because he's not doing anything to help them. As a matter of fact, in Chicago, just in the first 2 weeks of July, they've had 120 people shot, 26 killed so far. And of course, as we've been told many times by a former prosecutor in Chicago with Law Enforcement Against Prohibition, 80% of the shootings in Chicago are drug-related. Expect to see this kind of violence throughout America, especially if they can get gun control enacted. Now, in other news, we had a couple of breaking stories this weekend that point out what Alex Jones has been telling you for a very long time. First, we have a former commander of al-Qaeda saying that ISIS works for the CIA. And, of course, he doubles down and says, so is al-Qaeda. This is the founder of the Islamic Democratic Jihad Party, former top al-Qaeda commander, and he told the Beirut-based pan-Arab TV station Al Mayadeen all current al-Qaeda affiliates, including ISIS, work for the CIA. He says, what I want to tell you, the efforts of all Islamic countries, Sunni Shiites, must combine to eradicate these groups because these groups are the claws of colonialism in the region. He says that ISIS, or now as they're calling themselves IS, or the Islamic State, is part of a neocon and Israeli clean break program to balkanize the Arab and Muslim Middle East, designed for endless war. That's what our foreign policy has been designed around for the longest time. And what are these surveillance programs that we're suffering under here designed for? Well, the former technical head of the NSA, the highest-ranking whistleblower to come out so far, William Binney, said that it is nothing less than total population control. That's the aim, he says, of the NSA. In this article, he says 80% of all phone calls, and not just metadata, are being stored by the NSA. He said 80% of fiber optic cables globally go through the U.S. He says this is not an accident. It allows the U.S. to view all communications coming in. At least 80% of all audio calls, not just metadata, are recorded and stored in the U.S. The NSA lies about what it stores. This is a guy who for 30 years worked for the NSA. This is the guy who was technical head of the NSA with global responsibilities. He was the global technical head. So you've got the former al-Qaeda commander telling you that it is truly al-Qaeda. You've got the former NSA technical head telling you, yes, they're lying to you. They really are storing everything, not just the metadata. And by the way, if it was just the metadata, that would be enough to be a violation of the Fourth Amendment. They can tell just as much, if not more so, from your metadata as they can from your phone conversations. Well, stay with us right after the break. We're going to talk about a supposedly new breakthrough in brain hacking. Stay with us.
The facts are in. The studies are legion. Sodium fluoride and other members of the fluorine family that are added to Western water supplies are devastating the health and cognitive ability of the people that drink it. So the question is, why are the social engineers adding it to the water? Simple. Dumb down the host population that the parasitic technocracy is feeding on. We developed the Fluoride Shield to be the highest quality, highest standards, because I use it every day and my family uses it every single day. Let's take a closer look at the ingredients that make up this special proprietary formula. Tamarind has been celebrated for its ability to immobilize toxic fluoride residues, while zeolites have a long history of attracting and holding toxic compounds. Enter fulvic acid, an excellent cleansing agent. Then we added the highest quality shilajit, a rare compound that is collected from the high mountains of the Himalayas. We topped it all off with a powerhouse herb cilantro that is intended to mobilize fluoride and other dangerous compounds for removal from the body. And the final touch to energize this formula is our proprietary nascent iodine. And as always, consult your physician as well, because that is important. And finally, Fluoride Shield, Survival Shield, and all the products at InfoWarsLife.com grew out of my quest to try to find the very best compounds from God's cornucopia to protect myself and my family. And from our research, I believe we are bringing you the best, highest quality products. And you have that commitment from Alex Jones and the entire InfoWars crew.
Welcome back. Now, DefenseOne.com reports that there's been a breakthrough in brain hacking. They call it a checkered history. As they point out, the military has been looking to build better brain hacks for decades, with results that have ranged from the frightening to the comical. Well, there's not a whole lot to laugh about with this. One of the things that they're talking about here, and it's not really so much the technology that's important, I think it's really the ethics and their goals, what they're trying to accomplish. But here's what they say about this breakthrough. They say scientists funded by the Defense Department have just announced a breakthrough that can allow researchers to create in 220 days an extremely detailed picture of the brain that previously would have taken 80 years of scans to complete. So they can do it in 220 days, what they previously would have taken 80 years to complete. Now, of course, that's being funded by the Defense Department. These people are telling us with a straight face that this is strictly for helping people with Alzheimer's or people who have traumatic brain disorders. And they're also telling us that their brain research is going to help veterans with PTSD, because they're going to be able to go in and selectively remove memories or implant memories. And of course, part of that program is Obama's BRAIN initiative, a multi-billion-dollar program. DARPA's got a huge chunk of that. And they're talking about their program, Restoring Active Memory. Look at that acronym, RAM. Does that sound familiar? If you know anything about a computer, it does. RAM is the computer's memory. So basically, they look at you as essentially a computer that they can hack. That's why they're talking about brain hacking. That's why they're talking about their RAM program. You should be very concerned. If they were genuinely concerned about medical issues, and of course, that's not at all what the Defense Department and DARPA are focused on. They're about creating war machines, okay? They're not about doing medical research. If they had any real concern about the veterans, they would be doing something for them in just ordinary care at the VA. So you should be very skeptical of anything that they tell you. If they do come up with a treatment, will they make it available to the vets? I seriously doubt it. They're always saying they're going to do that. We should remember the history of what they did to World War II veterans with PTSD. They gave them lobotomies. So this kind of rings hollow. And of course, they're being joined by Lawrence Livermore National Labs. They have, get this, high-fidelity neural recordings. They're trying to do everything they can to map and to record your memory. It's not enough for them to record all of our metadata, not enough for them to record all of our phone conversations, as the former head of the NSA said. He said they want total population control. That's how you do it with these brain projects. So if you're approached by somebody for some research, think twice about that. We need to try to cut this kind of funding off for this kind of dangerous research. But look at the other side of this. There's also, of course, a race for artificial intelligence. This article from Wired Magazine points out that Microsoft is jumping into this to try to race Google to see who can create the first artificial brain. And of course, it's not just Google and Microsoft, it's also Apple and even Facebook. These are the people who are trying to get in and create artificial intelligence, what they call deep learning. In other words, trying to make cognitive sense out of multiple inputs, speech, vision, text, all at the same time. So that's where we're headed. They're trying to control that. Who do you think is going to control the artificial intelligence? Well, it's the same people who are seeking to control all aspects of the population. Well, speaking of removing veterans' memories, Staff Sergeant Joe Biggs' memory is very much intact. Stay with us right after the break. We have another installment of In the Trenches.
Alex Jones here to break down some exciting developments in the area of research concerning supplemental iodine. It's nothing less than phenomenal. I began to get into iodine a few years ago because it was helping me and my family so much get healthy and detoxify. And I used some of the mainline iodine supplements and they upset my stomach and I had some issues with it. Until I discovered a product being developed by Dr. Group, who I was already interviewing as an expert on my radio show, and I began taking the product before he actually rolled it out. You now know it as Survival Shield True Nascent Iodine that your body can really absorb. Then, about a year ago, he said, listen, if you think this is powerful, I'm going to come out with rare earth, deep earth crystals that are incredibly powerful that no one else has as a source for their iodine from between 7,000 and 12,000 feet, literally drilled out of the ground. You put it on a hot plate and it turns into the pure gas. No one else has 99.99% pure iodine. And the results that I personally have had have been life-changing. I was over 270 pounds. And with the iodine, exercise, and better diet, I have lost now more than 50 pounds total, and I'm continuing to lose the weight. I have more energy, my libido, all this crap came out of my skin. I believe our research is conclusive. This is the best iodine out there. And I know this for a fact. Nobody else has got iodine based on these pure crystals, ladies and gentlemen. This is innovating. This is trailblazing. And the best part is it helps fund Infowars.com, the radio show, the TV show, the whole media operation promoting true libertarian ideas. For a limited time, experience the ancient power of Survival Shield X2. Take advantage of this unprecedented 30% off super detox special at InfoWarsLife.com.
Let me tell you a story about a couple of years ago when I was in Afghanistan. The unit I was with, we got a call from our commanding unit back in Salerno, Afghanistan, and they had intel on what they thought was going to be a possible IED making facility. So we get this call and we're kind of thinking like, all right, what are we going to come across? This is going to be crazy. None of us are, EOD trained. We don't know how to deal with explosives that much. That's going to be a little crazy going up into this place like that without that kind of training. So we got everything gathered, all the equipment we could possibly think we would need for something like this. And we kind of go up to the door and we don't know what to expect at all. We walk in and there's this family, just regular family. I think there was 4 adult males, a couple wives, and a whole bunch of kids, cows, goats, all this stuff inside this compound area. And we're walking around, and I'm sitting there thinking, this place could be booby-trapped. Every time I took a step, I'm sitting there thinking, oh my God, this would be the last step I ever take in my life. So we go through and we have an initial search of the entire compound. We don't find anything at all. And usually when we get intel from the source that we got it from, it's usually always been pretty much spot on. It's never been too far off. So I was sitting there thinking, you know what, I'm going to get my metal detector. So I run back out to the MRAP and I go grab the metal detector and come back in and I just start scanning the walls. And we immediately start getting hits. So we bring out hammers and all that stuff and just start knocking through the walls. And what we found was mind-blowing. The skin, the hair on my skin just popped up. I had goosebumps. HME, which is homemade explosives, passports, money, grenades, weapons, throughout. They had it buried under huge stacks of hay. Just after we spent time, we went through with that detector. We found so much stuff and laid it out. It was an entire arsenal. They had phone books with people's names in New York circled, like Congress people, things like that, that they had intent, they had the money, they had the backing, they had the explosives to pull it off. And it was just nuts. And the scariest thing for me was seeing those glass marbles, because what happens when something like that blows up and you go in and you get x-rayed, you can't pick up glass shards. So when that hits you, those fragments go into your body, those marbles, and you're just bleeding to death. You just sit there and the doctors are laying around you like, there's nothing they can do. And just to see what they had in the plan, it wasn't just an IED making facility. These guys were planning on doing something over here in America. So for all these people that think that a lot of this stuff's made up, it's real. The threat is out there. There's people out there who hate us, who want us killed. I know we funded Taliban back in the day.
Let's remember here, the people we are fighting today, we funded.
But these were Taliban guys that had money to do it, and they had the motivation to get all that stuff and spend that much time hiding that stuff in their compound, putting up these huge fake walls, holding all their stuff. I wake up in the middle of the night sometimes just sitting there thinking like, oh my God, like if we wouldn't have stopped that from happening, that could have been another big incident here on our home turf. And I'm just glad that we got the intel we did to be able to go out there and stop that from happening.
Well, that's it for tonight's news. If you're not a subscriber to Prison Planet TV, please consider becoming one. You can share your subscription with up to 11 other people simultaneously, not only giving them nightly news, but also access to all of Alex Jones's documentaries. Join us again tomorrow at 7 Central, 8 p.m. Eastern.
This is Alex Jones for InfoWarsLife.com. The latest in preparedness is now here. An electrically stabilized colloidal silver solution that can be added to both your home cabinet and preparedness pack alike. Concentrated to 30 parts per million in what has been dubbed the survival silver solution. And it's entirely free of toxic artificial additives that are loaded into many products. Purchase your bottle of InfoWarsLife.com Silver Bullet Colloidal Silver today and find other amazing supplements at InfoWarsLife.com.
You are watching the Infowars Nightly News, which airs 7 p.m. Central at InfoWarsNews.com. Members can share their passcodes with up to 11 other people, and your support is helping us defend liberty worldwide.